What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, January 25th, 2017, hump day, middle of the weekday. Starting that long, slow glide down to Kaahumanu Friday and another amazing weekend of whatever it is they're going to come up with now. And we've got lots to talk about. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with whatever your comments and questions are. Now then, Donald Trump continues to stand his ground, continues to talk about issues we know are genuine, and continues to battle it out with the corporate media that is desperate to try and pull that wool back over your eyes about what things are really like in this country. And Donald Trump, responded to all this constant wailing about Hillary won the popular vote, Hillary won the popular vote, and Trump says the same thing we've all been saying. You have to subtract those illegal immigrant voters who are not supposed to vote and all the dead voters and everything, at which point the corporate media, which is a part of the election fraud system in this country, because remember, Voters News Service is owned by the TV news networks and some of the influential papers. So this is actually their thing that's being exposed here. So they're out there screaming, well, there's absolutely no proof of this. It's ridiculous. It's how you're threatening democracy by saying our elections may not be honest. And remember, we already have 3 websites you should be looking at. Votefraud.org, which has estimated at least 3 million illegal immigrants voted in this last election. You have TrueTheVote.org, which came up to the same numbers, and then you have BlackBoxVoting.org, which is Bev Harris' operation that has been dealing with this issue of election fraud for years here. So the New York Slimes comes on out and says it's an absolute lie to claim that millions of illegals voted in the election. Now, this is an absolutely unsupportable statement. The New York Slimes can't actually know. Why? Because of all those states that threw out voter ID laws. The New York Slimes can't prove that only legal citizens voted in this last election because the system is set up to hide that. So the New York Slimes is out there saying, it's a lie, and how dare you? And basically, if you remember the expression, hoist with your own petard, the corporate media just did exactly that, because Donald Trump is now calling for a major investigation into election fraud. And there is so much there to be found. I mean, they found it during the primaries, during the general election. When Jill Stein was having the recounts, they found even more, but all of it favoring Hillary Clinton. Detroit actually stopped their recount because they had more votes than voters. And this is nonsense. Absolute ridiculousness. Now, the corporate media is still out there trying to defend their claim that hardly anybody showed up for Donald Trump's election, and still trying to stand by that photo that Reuters put out that was obviously taken hours before the inauguration began. And even though CNN echoed that same statement, they put out their gigapixel resolution image of Trump's inauguration speech, and you can see it's a huge crowd. Now, Trump's inauguration broke live streaming records. More and more people are on live streaming. They're getting off of their cable TV. More about that later on. And Donald Trump's inauguration was the most watched news event streamed online to date. So this idea that nobody was watching, nobody was supporting. By the way, did anything ever come of that concert they were going to have down in Florida where a bunch of liberal has-been celebrities were going to sing and dance and try and steal Trump's thunder? Did that even happen? I don't even know at this point here. Now, Bill Maher is out there screaming about Donald Trump and his grab comment from years ago, and Jenna Jameson finally had enough of that and basically said, she's seen Bill Maher at the Playboy Mansion actually doing the grabbing, not even just talking, but just doing it, which a lot of that does happen at the Playboy Mansion, and they have security who will escort you out if you do that. But I guess if you're a Bill Maher, you can get away with it. And so once again, we have a liberal saying, you can't say that, you can't say that, but I can do it. I'm allowed to do it. And look about the hypocrisy. You have all those women marching in Washington, D.C. Over a crass comment that Donald Trump made before he even entered political office, and still not a word about former President Bill Clinton, who's been accused of rape and sexual assault dozens of times. But it's okay for Bill Clinton to behave this way because, after all, he's a liberal. And we love liberals. We'll forgive anything a liberal will do. But when it comes to Donald Trump, he's been accused of horrible, horrible crimes, and even innocence shouldn't be allowed to be a defense. Now, getting on back to hoisting with one's own petard, first of all, before I get into the story, I'm going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network. Now, as you know, Madonna came on out with that ridiculous statement about blowing up the White House. She was using the F word. It was going out live on the news network TV. They're probably going to be in trouble with the FCC about that. And somebody actually suggested maybe she said she simply wanted to blow the White House, because remember, she made a promise of a sexual favor she would grant to everybody who voted for Hillary Clinton, which is probably going to take her a long time to do. But the Secret Service is investigating her. She's backing off and saying, you're taking it out of context. I mean, when I'm saying I want to blow up the White House, I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to interpret that. But the backlash is already happening because radio stations all across America are now dropping Madonna's songs from their play rotations. They don't want to have anything to do with this controversy. And, of course, Madonna will be losing money because these radio stations do have to pay a royalty for playing that song on the air. So Trump is basically fighting a war with the establishment media, and he's basically launching all these truth bombs out there. And they're going to lose. The corporate media is going to lose this one. Everything they do blows up in their faces. Now, over at MSNBC, they ran an article still about that inauguration photo, fact-checking White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer's inauguration numbers. And MSNBC, he's exaggerating. There was hardly nobody. And it's almost fun watching the corporate media screaming over and over again, we're not the liars, you're the liars. We're not the liars, you are the liars. We are telling the truth, you are the fake news. Like we're all going to be hypnotized by this and believe this. And when I posted this to WhatReallyHappened.com, I put up a side-by-side set of photos from the 2013 inauguration and the 2017 inauguration. And you can see the crowds are pretty much the same size. Now, the Washington Compost and the New York Slimes came out earlier today with a report that President Trump is going to sign an executive order lifting the ban on the CIA's use of black sites, which is where the CIA did all this torturing of people to find weapons of mass destruction that turned out not to exist. And, of course, Sean Spicer came on out and said, that's not a White House document. There's nothing here in the White House about that. They're making it up again. And I'm sure the Washington Compost and the New York Times are going to say, oh, yes, Trump's a terrible person who believes in torture, and he's lying to you about it. I mean, I really wonder why we are not seeing an arrest of CNN's president, who literally threatened Donald Trump that if he didn't make nice with CNN, CNN would start a war in the Middle East for him to deal with. Almost reminds me of that character out of that one James Bond movie. I can't believe it. He was a media tycoon, and he was making the news. And he had this global empire, and he was just out there causing all this trouble to sell newspapers and TV shows and stuff. Meanwhile, the New York Slimes is apparently taking offense to this phrase, America first. Ooh, America first. How could you say such a thing? Easy, I'm an American. What are you over there at the New York Slimes? And it's really kind of amazing. The globalists are in a panic, and we are seeing all of the people who were part of this push for a one-world government in the media, and they're just getting more and more hysterical. Now then, to give them a little bit of credit, the New York Times actually ran a correction on their editorial that was attacking the Electoral College because of this claim that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. And the New York Times did admit that in the past, when it was working for the Democrats, the New York Times supported the Electoral College. So the issue was never the Electoral College itself. It's about helping the liberals and attacking the GOP. Remember during that whole primary season when we kept seeing Bernie Sanders winning all the popular votes, and somehow through the machinations of the DNC, Hillary wound up with all the delegates? Nobody was complaining about the system then, because Hillary was getting the benefit of it. Boy, I'll tell you, if liberals didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all, I think. We posted a video clip from Denzel Washington, and basically he was being interviewed about what's going on with the fake news, and he came on out and he said, the corporate media is blowing it, because right now they're in a rush to get there first with a story, and they're just not being very careful about checking it out. And he basically wagged his finger at them good and hard, which may have negative consequences for his career, because apparently this anti-Trump blacklist is already running out there in Hollywood. Even Nicole Kidman pulled back on her statement. Welcome to my world, Nicole. Been there, done that, did not buy the T-shirt. Now, as you know, one of the more disreputable things that we have seen coming out of the corporate media were these tweets and comments about Barron Trump, Donald Trump's 10-year-old son. And they were pretty nasty. They were pretty nasty. And the White House issued a statement yesterday reminding everybody that it has been considered a White House and media tradition to allow the families of the president to grow up outside the political spotlight. Nobody went after the Obama kids, no matter how outrageous they behaved. They're off limits. And so should Barron. But again, right now it's an ends justify the means kind of mindset coming over there. Now then, I'm actually getting a lot of emails from around the world where apparently a lot of countries have gotten rid of electronic voting machines and tabulation centers and are now running their elections more or less along the lines of the system I described earlier this week. And apparently South Africa doing the ink on the fingers and the counting of the ballots right there at the voting station. Well, if South Africa can do it, if the Netherlands can do it, if all these other countries can do it, why can't the United States do it? Why must we persist in choosing our government or trying to choose our government with an election system that is opaque, unverifiable, prone to fraud, almost seems designed to facilitate fraud and conceal it? And of course, the corporate media, every time the fraud is exposed, oh, it was a mistake, it was a calibration error. It was a glitch. You know, nothing to see here. Just believe us when we tell you tomorrow who your new leaders are. And it doesn't matter what Trump's investigation into vote fraud finds, the corporate media is part of the problem. They will attack him. They will scream bloody murder that this investigation is a witch hunt, that it's this, that it's that, because they're part of the problem. They are part of the problem. Now, Donald Trump has whipped out his presidential memorandum pen. I guess they decided not to call it an executive order anymore because of the negative connotations coming in from his predecessor. But he's basically, as he promised he was going to do, he's imposing hiring freezes, regulatory freezes, and it's his opponents are already out there saying, oh, it's an attack on our living standards, it's an attack on our democratic rights, and Harry Truman was right. That Oval Office is the hottest kitchen in the world, and no matter what you do, there's going to be some idiot who doesn't like it. And that's certainly true. Now, somebody actually did a poll of federal employees, and apparently 28% of them said that they're so incensed over Donald Trump's election, they may quit their jobs. Well, Trump's been in office now for coming up on a week, and I'm not seeing a flood of resignations being handed in. Now, Donald Trump has also issued orders to various groups like EPA and USDA from talking to the media, broadcasting on social media, or awarding grants, because what he's seeing going on already are these government agencies that are part of the executive branch trying to bypass him and go directly to the media with statements in support of things like, well, vaccines are safe and GMO is safe and the world is getting warmer and so forth and so on. And so Trump is trying to rein that in and say that the White House will make all the public statements about the executive branch because that's what the White House is in charge of. Now, Rasmussen has run a poll and found 3/4 of Americans, or almost 3/4 of Americans, are absolutely on board with Donald Trump's blast against the Washington establishment. The vast majority of the American people are in agreement that elitists in Washington, D.C. have grown wealthy at the expense of ordinary American people. And also, according to Rasmussen, Trump's approval rating is booming up since the inauguration. And the liberals and Hillaryites are gritting their teeth here. So, let's see, moving on down here. Interesting little article that came out of Zero Hedge. The Democratic Party is out of ideas, and their strategy to move forward is to quadruple down on this failed identity politics. They almost got Hillary in by turning blacks against the whites and men against women and gays against straight. So they're just going to do more of it. They're going to do more of it going into 2020. Which means the Democratic leadership hasn't learned anything at all. If the Democrats want to start rebuilding their credibility with the American voters, I've got a solution right now, and her name is Tulsi Gabbard. Because this lady is impressive. She is very impressive, and she's going on out, and she's dealing with the real world. She's not caught up in ideology. The fact that she's not even being considered for 2020 is a damning indictment of the DNC's leadership. They're talking about Hillary Clinton coming back, or Joe Biden, or Michelle Obama. Remember the screaming about Donald Trump's never held elected office before. Neither has Michelle Obama, and she's on that short list for 2020. Now, speaking of Hillary Clinton, apparently her strategy for her comeback in 2020 is she is going to launch a liberal television talk show, like The View isn't liberal enough, and Hillary will be the host in order to basically keep her face in front of the American people so that she is well positioned for another try for the White House in 2020. Now, this will make Hillary America's second oldest female news or talk show host after Joy Behar of The View. Now, that, of course, is supposing that somewhere in the next 4 years, Hillary is not charged with a felony. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we come back from these words from our sponsors. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the fact that Hillary Clinton is giving every sign that she's going to try and run for the White House again in 2020. And she just wants to be America's first female president. She doesn't really have any kind of a policy or plan beyond that. And so she's launching this new liberal TV talk show like we don't already have enough of those. so that her face is constantly in front of America, or at least those Americans who tune into her. Now, the one thing that will stop Hillary from running for the White House in 2020 is if she's convicted of a felony. Now, remember, when James Comey came on out talking about the email server scandal, he went down the list acknowledging violations of Title 18. Then, of course, as apparently he was ordered to do, said, well, we're not going to bring charges. But that's not the same thing as exoneration. Hillary can still be charged for those crimes. If the incoming Attorney General looks at that list of Title 18 violations, Hillary could be charged for that. And then you have Judicial Watch is looking at the Clinton Foundation and the email server. The IRS is looking at the Clinton Foundation. It's going to be a very long 4 years. And all it takes is one felony conviction, and she is banned from holding public office. All righty, let's see. Let's grab a couple of phone calls here. Scott in Norfolk, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Isn't it fantastic? Just 5 days into President Trump's administration, the Dow hits 20,000.
Well, there's a lot of optimism on Wall Street. Trump is talking about all these infrastructure projects, and they're all constrained to use American-supplied material and American labor. So that's a very good thing. And apparently Wall Street is also excited about the fact that we may be offloading all of these illegal immigrants and refugees who've been a burden on social services and the tax base. So yeah, it's all good news.
Well, what I called about was I have had a feeling in the last several years that the DNC is alienating black voters. And what made me really feel that way was after the 2000 election when Al Gore refused to allow the Black Caucus to challenge the election results. And they needed one senator in the Senate to vote to challenge the results, and they couldn't get one. There was not a black senator in there or anybody that would challenge the results. And what makes me think about it now more now than ever is the last time the crowd size at the mall in Washington, D.C. caused controversy was the Million Man March. Remember when they said that the Clinton administration said, oh, there's not that many black fathers that were out in the mall?
Yeah. I remember that.
That is bringing back memories. And another thing is these social justice warriors, particularly the white liberal ones, are over-dramatically presenting themselves as the victims over and above their fellow black liberals who are going from a black president to what they have been led by the media to fear, a Trump presidency who's not going to help them. And they're feeling that their views are being eclipsed by these privileged white social justice warriors. And it's offensive. And just to point out one video that I've had some black colleagues say that was offensive was the Hollywood actors and actresses that did the retake on the I Will Survive song. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, I've seen that one, yes.
And a lot of the white actors in that act blasé about it. As they're singing Gloria Gaynor's heartfelt words.
Yes.
That's offensive. That's offensive to blacks, whether they're liberal or conservatives. I think the liberals are going to mess up because once Trump is going to bring back the jobs, and a lot of those jobs are not only going to go to manufacturing jobs, going to go to everybody that wants them.
Well, for 4 years from now, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're about to hit a commercial break. 4 years from now, everybody in the United States of America is going to understand that all of these claims about Donald Trump made by the corporate media and the liberals and Hillary's campaign were just lies, because he's not going to turn into this monster that we were all told he would. He's on track to keeping most of his campaign promises. Anyway, Scott, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here and start with Bill in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good.
Just had two quick things to say. First, I wanted to recommend the video to you and the rest of our Rivero Rangers. When you get done watching all the JFK conspiracy videos and the Sabruder film, I highly recommend watching this video with Jim Mars that interviews James Files. I'm not going to get into why. You can make your own decision on it, but that guy was there, man. I mean, it's pretty lengthy, but when you listen to what it's a guy that's in jail, and I think he was one of the hitmen that worked under Sam Giancana, but it was a lot involved in it. You know that. I mean, but
yeah,
I've watched a lot of documentaries and it's really intense.
Yeah. Okay. What was the name of that video again?
It's Jim Mars, and I'm sure you know who he is.
Yes, I do.
And he interviews this convict. His name is James Files. And
all right,
I think the video is called "I Shot JFK" or something. But if you log in, Jim Mars interviews James Files. It's pretty lengthy, but I've seen a lot of different things about it, read books and all that. And
I've heard of this guy before here. He's serving life in prison already, and he's come on out and said that he was one of the hired shooters in Dealey Plaza, one of many, obviously. I think when E. Howard Hunt passed away, he passed on some information to his son also. Because that JFK assassination, that was the black core of the whole Watergate scandal, and that's why Richard Nixon had to resign rather than let the investigation move forward, because had it come on out that John F. Kennedy had been assassinated by a multitude of groups that included the U.S. government itself, and then the U.S. government covered it up and lied about it, that would have delegitimized the entire government.
Yeah, and there was a lot involved in it, and he was actually an Army buddy, this James Files. He has nothing to lose, nothing to gain. He's not getting paid. He's not getting rich off of it or anything, but I'm not going to ruin it by explaining the video because I don't want to run out of time here, but if you haven't seen it, it's about an hour and a half long, but, I mean, when he explains how he was there and all I don't want to get into it, but it's too lengthy, but I'm telling you, I think he was the guy. But anyway, one thing I wanted to ask you about that no one's talking about, but you did mention that the globalist New World Order would probably most likely throw a false flag up to attack the United States and blame it on Russia. But one thing I think no one's talking about that I saw this Japanese scientist talking about, and he has gone to Congress several times, and they have a solution, and they have the equipment and the technology to save our power grid. If the power grid was attacked in some way, and they blame it on Russia or whatever they're going to do and shut it down, I mean, it'll make Argentina look like a picnic in the park. I mean, you're talking, you know, no electricity, no water. People start eating their animals, and they turn to cannibalism. I mean, it gets pretty ugly. Anyway, he's went to Congress several times. He's a Japanese scientist. I cannot remember his name, but you probably know who he is. You know, with your background in that.
I'll look at that. Anyway, listen, I got to let you go. We got other callers on the line here. Thank you very much. And we're going to switch over to Errol in the Netherlands. Aloha. What's on your mind today?
Yes, aloha, Mike. I want to talk about the Women's March.
Okay.
I have a new terminology. And the new terminology is we have got feminists, and we know feminists have been taken over a long time ago because feminism was something else. But I have another one that's malo-list, so male-list. The males also. So I saw between the Women's March, I saw also males, so male-list. So I came to a conclusion, and this maybe you find this very funny. I found a new term, a new acclamation, you must call it, and I will call it the terminists, like the Terminator, the terminists. What do you think of that?
I don't know. I don't think we need to be...
Terminists march.
I don't think we need to come up with new terms and complicate things. I think we need, if anything, to just keep things simple and easy to understand for people, and not get sucked into slogans and jingos and artfully crafted labels or anything like that. Okay?
But they were funded by George Soros, or not?
Oh yeah, well we know that. I mean, Soros is just completely out there right now. He's just angry at Trump for disrupting his dreams of a one-world global empire. And apparently, when he was speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Soros literally came out and boasted to the audience that he was going to find some way to take down President Trump for disrupting his globalist plans for the world. And what's really ironic about that is the conclusion of Davos is that globalism has failed. And so Soros is acting like a spoiled brat, armed with billions of dollars. And he's very, very dangerous. Apparently he's filed a lawsuit to lead to the impeachment of President Trump, which strikes me as kind of weird because only Congress has the power to impeach and remove the president. No lawsuit can do it because of the sovereign immunity clause.
Exactly, and that's why it was just a joke and just comedy, because I wanted to call it not the Women's March, but the Terminists, the Terminists March.
I think the Crybabies March works just fine here. And again, the sheer hypocrisy of these women out there screaming that Donald Trump, you know, said something in locker room talk, and he was in a locker room long before he ran for political office. At the same time, they utterly ignore all the sexual assaults and rape committed by former President Bill Clinton. And it just underscores the fact that it isn't the sex, it isn't the assault, it is simply we want our side to win, and we don't care what we have to do to make it happen.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you very much.
Keep up the good work.
I certainly will. Thank you very much. Now then, Charles Ortel has been doing a lot of very good work. He's a financial analyst. And for the last couple of years, in fact, for more than 2 years now, he's been analyzing the Clinton Global Initiative charity and basically saying it is a global swamp, and there's more and more evidence coming out that the whole thing was a fraud, and he's not surprised that they're trying to shut it down and destroy all the documentation right now, especially since all of those foreign donations to the Clinton Foundation stopped the day that Hillary lost that election, which underscores that it really was a pay-for-play scheme all along. Now, getting on back to this issue of James Comey, the fact that during his speech in which they said they were not going to charge Hillary Clinton, the fact that he made a point of listing all the Title 18 violations tells me that James Comey was not at all happy about being put in that position. And I think now that Trump is going to keep him on as the FBI director, Comey sees an opportunity to rehabilitate his image with the public, to rehabilitate the image of the FBI with the public, and to move on forward. And now we're hearing where Congress is launching their own investigation about who within the FBI was actively working to protect Hillary Clinton. So we could see a real sweeping out of the FBI and all those people who were fully on board with what Hillary and Loretta Lynch and Obama were doing. And it needs to be done. We need to establish a deterrent so that future up-and-coming politicians will get the message that kind of behavior is no longer acceptable. So, now all these foreign governments are now out there screaming that it's time for Trump to be assassinated. And to nobody's surprise, there are all these liberal globalists here, and apparently a government official over in Sweden is openly calling for the assassination of President Trump. Apparently a German publisher is making the same comment. Now, I don't know where jurisdictional lines lie on this, but it is a crime, a felony, to threaten the life of the President of the United States of America. So what can be done in terms of international law, I'm not sure. But there are a lot of very reckless people out there, because if somebody does in fact take a shot at Donald Trump, all these people encouraging it could be prosecuted as accessories. Now, turning over to the war zones, and the corporate media still thinks that most Americans are morons and suckers and believe what they say. Apparently, Reuters came on out with an article saying Assad linked to Syrian chemical attacks for first time. And there's no backing for it. There's no backing for it at all. Even the United Nations chemical weapons inspectors said all of these attacks were done by the U.S.-sponsored rebels to frame Assad. And why is Reuters even bothering to come on out with this right now? Because the war in Syria is pretty much over, and the U.S. has been handed its worst military defeat since Vietnam. Latest reports are that ISIS defenses in northern Aleppo are collapsing, and even better, in the Idlib area, the rebels are actually now fighting each other over the dwindling supplies of weapons and ammunition and other. They're fighting each other to gain control of military and humanitarian supplies. Now, the Syria peace negotiations are going to resume in Geneva, and basically they're rejecting ISIS and al-Nusra, which is al-Qaeda in Syria. And these four nations, Syria, Russia, Iran, and Turkey, are going to hammer out some kind of a deal that finally settles all of this down. Now, when Obama was still in office, the United States was pointedly not invited to these peace talks, but I would not be at all surprised if an invitation was accepted, rather extended to Donald Trump's administration to have somebody come in there. Now, down in Israel, Israel's government continues to behave like Israel's government. Netanyahu is telling members of the Knesset that the new settlement homes that he's already authorized are just a taste, and claims that he's going to be able to convince Donald Trump that these settlements on stolen Palestinian land are a good thing. Maybe, for a while, but I think once Donald Trump deals with the government of Israel, government to government, I think his enthusiasm is going to wane. Even the most diehard Israel firsters in our government, by the time they're at the end of their term in office, they're just fed up. They just don't want to deal with Israel's government any longer. Now then, a little bit of good news coming on out there. As you know, there's a corruption probe into Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. And apparently, Israeli media is reporting that this corruption investigation is now widening into two other possible areas of corruption. So it looks to me like Israel may be getting ready to give Netanyahu the old heave-ho and get somebody more moderate in there. Now, do you remember Tzipi Livni? She used to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Israel between 2006 and 2009, and she has been forced to cancel a visit to Belgium over fears that she could be arrested for war crimes. And all of this goes back to the last war on Gaza, which the United Nations concluded represented collective punishment of the Gazan people, which is a war crime. So Tzipi is going to stay home on that one. Now let's talk about the economy. I think one of the reasons we're seeing the stock market take off is there's a lot of optimism that there's going to be a lot of real economic activity, not just printing up more money and showering it all over to make things look good. But Donald Trump is talking about a major investment in infrastructure, and he's got the first 50 of them already picked out. And it's estimated this is going to create 15 million jobs. for Americans, and the requirements for being on this list of infrastructure projects are that the parts and supplies of materials for these infrastructure projects come from American companies. Wow, what a really cool idea. Let's buy American. And I'm sure the New York Slimes is going to say, oh, that's horrible, that's racist, that's anti-globalist. Let's buy American. And yes, I got an email from somebody yesterday saying, you can't find anything made in America in the stores anymore. That's about to change. That is about to change here. Now, as you know, Donald Trump has come into office with his plan to make America great in the infrastructure plan, and the Democrats are now out there trying to come out and say, well, we have a better plan than you. Really, you should be letting us take care of this. Well, Democrats, if you had a plan to improve America's infrastructure, you had 8 years in which to start it, and you didn't do a darn thing. So stop trying to take credit for what Donald Trump is doing. Because you had your shot, you had your 8 years, it didn't get done. Now, the Caterpillar company has posted a record 49 consecutive months of declining retail sales. Apparently, Israel does not buy enough of those bulldozers for knocking down Palestinian homes to support the entire company. But again, these infrastructure projects are going to need this heavy machinery. So I would say if I actually had investment money, I'd be buying stock in Caterpillar because it's low now, but if these infrastructure projects take off, Caterpillar is going to be selling a lot of equipment. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to the show here. And I was talking before about how people are moving to streaming over the internet and starting to actually move away from cable TV companies. In our case, because our cable TV company is also our internet service provider, we still have cable TV. But we're starting to use some of the streaming services. We're on Amazon Live primarily, so we can watch Grand Tour. And I was able to see Vaxxed on Amazon Prime, and for some reason Time Warner Cable is not carrying that documentary. But more and more people are giving up that cable, and a lot of it has to do with some of the aggressive nonsense of the marketing department. A lot of it has to do with the fact that there's just nothing but reruns over and over and over and over again. So, a lot of cities now are starting to talk about what's being nicknamed the Netflix tax, because so many people are ending their cable TV subscriptions that tax revenues are in decline, and as usual, tax revenues can never be allowed to decline, and now they're talking about imposing a tax on streaming video that would amount to about $50 per year. They are greedy, aren't they? Now then, kind of an alarming story here. And I don't know if this is from the incoming administration of Trump or something that was left over from Obama. But the government is now guaranteeing, meaning putting the taxpayer at risk, on a new form of mortgage-backed securities. Mortgage-backed securities for rental home properties. And we could see a complete repeat of what happened in 2008 unless this gets reined in. One thing we should definitely say is no more will the American people be made to pay for Wall Street's mistakes. If a financial institution is going to go bankrupt, let them go bankrupt. Make room for somebody with better business sense rather than the right family names. Over in Great Britain, rough sleeping rates have grown 16% since last year. Now, over in Great Britain, sleeping rough is their phrase for a homeless person. It's apparently a softer, more politically correct euphemism for a person who's sleeping on the streets, but that's what they're calling it here. Now then, as you know, Brexit is in a state of turmoil. Britain's Supreme Court ruled that Parliament does have to be consulted before Title 50 can be invoked, and following that ruling, it is now expected a Brexit bill will be presented to Parliament within days. And, of course, the Remain people are saying, oh, this is great, we're going to remain slaves to the European Union. And the people who voted for Brexit are saying, this is just the government screwing us over again. You know, cheating us of what we want. They could start a civil war with this. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Trump's election victory and his steps along the path to build the wall with Mexico and basically oppose George Soros' globalism has started to produce an effect in Germany. Now, contrary to the German media, which is constrained by the German government as to how they portray the refugee crisis, most Germans have had enough. Merkel's poll numbers are really sinking rapidly, and Merkel's already out there saying, oh, the Russians are spreading bad information about me, and that's the only reason I'm unpopular. But apparently, in Germany, the German people and even the German elites are starting to think maybe independence isn't such a bad idea after all. And part of the reason they're thinking that, besides the refugee crisis, is the economic hardship that they're dealing with. Because right now, most of the countries in the European Union are in serious, serious debt problems created for them by the European Central Bank, the IMF, and the World Bank, and so forth and so on. And right now, for the last few years, Great Britain and Germany have been carrying the load of the entire EU. Money is taken away from Great Britain and from Germany and used to try and deal with the debt in these other European Union nations. And it's kind of like having a wooden boat with 10 holes drilled in the bottom and only 9 corks. And everything that they do really comes down to somebody grabbing a cork out of one hole and shoving it into another hole in full view of the media cameras and saying, I'm working to solve the problem. But the water still comes in, the debt continues to grow, and it's only a matter of time before the system founders. And if the Brexit does happen, then that leaves Germany alone trying to make the payments on the debts of all those other nations, and the German people aren't going to want to do that. Now, as it turns out, over in Spain, Catalonia is going to hold an independence referendum. And basically, the president of Catalonia is going ahead with the independent referendum this September. And, of course, Brussels is saying, no, nobody ever leaves the European Union. But the reality is, and I'm looking at the story over in governmentslaves.info, European anti-globalists are now uniting to basically take back their respective countries from this European mishmash sautéed with refugees from all of these areas. And even Mario Draghi, the head of the European Central Bank, is now saying it is very possible that the European Union is going to fall apart despite our best efforts to keep all these people our slaves. Now, Draghi is out there saying that any member leaving the Eurozone has to settle all their debts first. I don't know how he's planning on enforcing that. What's he going to do? Send an army in? Say, you can't leave us until you pay us all this debt that we created for you? Now, up at the World Economic Forum in Davos, a top topic of conversation, besides George Soros saying he's going to get Donald Trump, is they're finally acknowledging globalism isn't working. The people of planet Earth are rejecting globalism. We want to be our own little countries. We want to remember who we are historically, what our history is, what our culture is, what our particular religion is. We don't want to be blended together. And they're finally acknowledging in Davos, globalization is failing. And the New World Order is seriously being upended. And part of the problem is there are elections coming up in Europe in which the anti-globalist, anti-refugee, anti-establishment parties are gaining in the polls. Just like we did here in the United States of America. All Americans united together and got out there and overcame the election fraud. Now, apparently down in Texas, there is a growing tiff over the so-called sanctuary cities. As you know, Donald Trump is ending that, saying that there's no such thing as a place in the United States where immigration laws are not going to be applied. And apparently there's a county down in Texas that's standing firm saying, we're a sanctuary county and everything. Texas Governor Abbott is saying, we're going to cut all funding to you. You don't get any Texas tax money as long as you continue on this failed policy. Now, Donald Trump has now signed the executive order to build the border wall. Now, the good news is that actually most of that wall is already built. He just needs to fill in the gaps. I still think crocodiles in the Rio Grande would be cheaper. Or we could get the pumpkin chunkin' people and modify their air cannons and just shoot the illegals back over the border. Trophy goes to the longest distance and the most number of bounces. But he's moving forward on that. And, of course, all of the pro-immigration people are out there screaming, you're a racist, you're a racist, you're a racist. And the response to that is, illegal is not a race. And that's how you shut them up. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, as you know, Chicago, under Mayor Rahm Emanuel, has become an exceedingly violent place, even though it is held up as the model of the liberals' gun control agenda, where all the law-abiding citizens are totally disarmed and the criminals have free reign of the streets. That apparently is what liberalism is all about, because anti-gun is pro-crime. Donald Trump has now hurled the defy, saying that if Chicago, specifically Mayor Rahm Emanuel, cannot get the murder rates under some kind of control, the U.S. government will send in its own federal forces to restore law and order there. You want to end the murder sprees in Chicago, you start giving the law-abiding citizens weapons. They are entitled to them under that Second Amendment. Now then, a few years ago, the rage was 3D TV. And I viewed it as a passing fad. I have the same opinion about 4K TV. And the reason had to do with prior history with 3D and motion pictures. And I will admit the new system, the real 3D, is very good, but directors tend to abuse it so horribly. The only 3D movie I've ever seen that really worked was Avatar, because Cameron knew not to overdo it, not to be gratuitous about it. It's a beautiful film. It's my favorite film. But we had a high-def TV, and it went bad, and it went bad at a time where the only replacements we could get were all 3D sets. So we got a 3D set. We got the little glasses and all the rest of it. We've hardly ever used the 3D function. One of the big problems was a lack of content. Yes, there are 3D Blu-rays that you can get, but our Time Warner cable channel had a 3D channel that lasted about a month. And what they had on there was just junk anyway. Piranha 3D. And I predicted back then, this isn't going to last. People don't need that 3D. They just want a good, clear picture that tells them a story. And now we are getting word. Sony and LG are no longer going to make three-dimensional TV sets. They just weren't selling. Now then, getting onto the realm of computers and malware, which is completely out of control. Apparently, the Google Play Store has been victimized by a bunch of apps that are infected with viruses. And they're now anticipating millions of handsets have been infected with adware that pops up ads over your favorite websites or your favorite videos. And apparently there is an app to deal with this called the Checkpoint app that will let you know if your Android device is infected. But this malware is completely, totally out of control. What is the NSA doing about any of this? According to Edward Snowden, they're just sitting there in the dark, amusing themselves with stolen pictures of naked people. Because they sure as heck are not actually making our cyber infrastructure any more secure. They haven't found any real terrorists. They can't find the ransomware writers. And these ransomware writers are not just a threat to computers and the economy. When they attack hospitals, they're putting patients' lives at risk. Because under the Affordable Care Act, all hospital records are supposed to be computerized. And if you cannot get at those records, and you're treating a patient and it slips your mind that they're allergic to certain medications, you could wind up killing them. But nobody seems to care. Now, I love this next story. 5 states are looking at legislation that would enshrine the idea of right to repair electronics, meaning that manufacturers who sell things in those states will have to guarantee the availability of replacement parts to independent repair shops and consumers, and will have to make all their diagnostic and service manuals public. I love this idea because I grew up in an age where if you had something and it broke down, you could fix it yourself. I was a real whiz at fixing TVs when I was in high school. And I like that. And it angers me so much to see so many products where you'll buy the product, one little part wears out, can't get a replacement. Buy a new one. That's why I stopped using an automatic coffee maker and then just went to a press. Because I went through about 3 of these electronic computerized coffee makers where you set it up at night and the coffee's ready in the morning. And they all have these little thin foil metal baskets for the coffee. And that's the part that breaks after 3-4 months. And you go back to the store, do you have a replacement for this? No. But we have a new one on sale. And after a while you get tired of that. Now, I will mention that Bed Bath & Beyond is making a point of having replacement parts for some of their products. And we don't have a right to repair law in Hawaii. But I think some stores are beginning to realize that Americans don't have the money to buy a completely brand new appliance every 6 months. And that maybe their customers are going to be a little bit more loyal to them if they make it possible for them to survive a minor breakdown. I mean, that certainly works for me. Should work for you. But it often amazes me that all these people who scream about the environment, they never look at our present consumer pipeline, where you dig up some natural resources or cut down a tree or whatever, and you grind it up and you make something, anything. You put it in the store, it's bought, and because of planned obsolescence, it quits working after maybe a year. And you just take it and you throw it in a landfill, and it's toxic, it's poisoning the water, and the corporations go back out and dig up more raw materials and cut down more trees and make a new complete replacement. It's a very wasteful approach. It's very wasteful of our natural resources. It is very harmful to the environment. And all these liberals running around about human-caused global warming never seem to pick up on that. There's a real issue and a real problem there. They don't want to talk about that. They just want their carbon tax. So I love this idea that states are passing laws that when you buy electronic devices, appliances in their states, that you are guaranteed replacement parts. and access to the manual, so you can fix it for yourself. That's another part of becoming more self-sufficient, being able to fix your own things, instead of this enforced dependency on the authorized factory service technician who comes on out and replaces a washer, charges you $100. Now, according to a new report, and this is being reported over at IntelliHub, more than a third of the population of the United States of America does not have access to clean, reliable drinking water. And it's almost ironic. Years and years ago, there was this very clever gentleman, Tom Lehrer, and he was actually a college professor, but in his spare time he wrote funny songs, and he shot to prominence with a TV show called That Was the Week That Was, and then he put out several albums, and one of his songs was called Pollution, which talked about the air and water in the United States not being as healthy as it could be. Well, Tom, if he were with us today, would just be stunned at how prescient he turned out to be. Because more than a third of all Americans do not have access to clean, reliable drinking water. Everyone thought Flint was an aberration, and it isn't. The quality of our drinking water coming out of those faucets is third world. And as governments continue to cut corners so that they can boost the salaries of legislators, we're going to have more of this problem. That's what led to the Flint, Michigan water crisis. They wanted to save a few bucks, so they unhooked from a filtered clean water supply and just threw the hose into the river. And there was supposed to be a chemical that they could add to keep the acids in the river water from leaching the pipes, the lead pipes. They didn't even bother with that. They just bought bottled water for the government offices, and that was their solution. Water is essential to life, and more than one-third of Americans are not able to get safe, clean drinking water in their homes. That is pretty abysmal. So let's talk about Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., because he is now up for the fight of his life. And he's come on out with a statement that the CDC is an edifice of fraud, which we all know is already true because of that whistleblower who had written the CDC's report claiming to prove that there was no link between autism and vaccines, and then he blew the whistle and said, yeah, the report was a fraud. They cherry-picked the data to get the result that was going to help the vaccine makers, to get the result that was going to allow the vaccine court to deny financial assistance to the patients, to the parents rather, of children made autistic by the vaccines. Now, Robert Kennedy Jr., I mean, the corporate media is out there just screaming he's a conspiracy nut. He's a conspiracy nut. You know, which is kind of interesting because when Kennedy was involved with other charities, he was lionized. But the instant he endangers a favored corporate structure, they turn on him. And as you know, of course, Donald Trump has appointed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to chair this commission on vaccine safety. And Kennedy has accepted. And the vaccine industry is in an absolute blind panic over this. They can't control the discussion. So the media attacks are already underway. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's a kook. He's just seeking attention. He's this, he's that. Time magazine, or maybe we should call it Slime magazine, ran a hit piece on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for daring to address the possibility that mercury in vaccines might be a problem. And by the way, mercury was banned for vaccines all the way back in 1999. But the companies are still using it. And the FDA and the USDA let them get away with it. We'll be right back. And and aloha America. Welcome back to the show here, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So we're talking about this test of wills between the vaccine industrial complex and the new Commission on Vaccine Safety that Donald Trump has arranged to be headed by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is a long-time critic of vaccines. And as I was mentioning before we went to the commercial break, the FDA actually banned mercury in vaccines all the way back in 1999. And the vaccine companies are still putting it in there. They're trying to find loopholes and just fend things off here. And you have to ask, what's going on? Well, remember, autism is not an historic human disease. It didn't surface until the 1940s, just a few years after vaccine makers started using mercury-based preservatives in their product. And it's been growing and growing and growing, and the more mandatory vaccines they have, the more kids are being diagnosed as autistic. And at the current growth rate, I mean, it's 1 in 45 now, at the current growth rate, by the year 2030, half of the children born in the United States of America will be diagnosed as autistic. That is a major problem when half of your population can't join the workforce, and the available workforce is taken up in large part caring for and supporting these autistic children. Now, if the vaccine companies have known all along that the mercury was a problem, then it becomes understandable why they're still trying to put the mercury in the vaccines. Because if they had stopped in 1999 and all of a sudden autism rates plummeted, then everybody would know that all the scientists who said the mercury was the problem, and it is a known neurotoxin, everybody would know it had been the mercury all along, and there would be massive civil litigation. One of the reasons that the vaccine companies are pushing for mandatory vaccination policy all across the country, not just the money. They don't want a population of unvaccinated children available for comparisons, although that actually got done a few months ago, where they were studying homeschool children, and they had enough unvaccinated children for a statistically valid comparison, and they found out, big surprise, the unvaccinated children were overall much healthier than the vaccinated children. So we're talking about this hit piece by Time magazine, and what's amazing is that when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was working on environmental issues, he was named as one of Time magazine's heroes for the planet. He was a good guy. He's all about the environment and the planet and everything. And he says, there might be a problem with vaccines. Oh, he's a kook. He's a wacko. He's dangerous. And so they put out this article basically saying why Donald Trump's choice of RFK Jr. as vaccine czar is a terrible idea. And it's full of half-truths, misrepresentations, and misdirection. It's a hit piece. It's an absolute hit piece. All right, we're going to start with a phone call from Steve in California, and I may have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Well, a comment and a question. I got a tech question for you after the comment. But when you're talking about the vaccine industry here, you know, I watched The Insider a couple of days ago with Russell Crowe.
Yes. Who
represented Jeffrey Wigand, Dr. Wigand, who blew the whistle on the tobacco industry, how they did nicotine boosting with chemicals. It's funny how he's hailed a hero, but the CDC head scientist who comes out and tells the truth, they turn the tables and make him look like a kook. I would like to see him actually subpoenaed and go before Congress and basically blow the whistle on everything he knows about. I'd love to see that happen.
You mean the CDC scientist who
I think his name is Thompson.
Yeah, Thompson. Did you notice in that Insider where the part? Well, I tell you what. Hang on. Going to take a break for commercials. When we come on back, I have an observation to make. And hello, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Steve in California, and we're talking about how wonderful it would be for Thompson to testify before Congress. But if you remember, going back to that Russell Crowe movie, The Insider, which, by the way, it is a wonderful film. It's based on the true story about a very heroic man. But if you remember in the movie, though, there was this issue of the non-disclosure that Weigand had signed with the cigarette manufacturer, and how if he was compelled to testify before a legal proceeding, that he could be sued by his former employer. So there would have to be some kind of a fix to deal with that. We need to restore whistleblower protection laws for that very reason. And for those of you not familiar with the story about Weigand, he was this executive at this cigarette corporation, and he was aware that the corporation was using chemicals to boost the effects of the nicotine to make the cigarettes more addictive. And the particular chemicals they were using were actually toxic and harmful. And they were trying to find a new replacement, but until they could find the replacement, they continued using these dangerous chemicals to make their cigarettes more addicting. And at this same time, though, Congress was starting to hold hearings about the issue of tobacco.
My dogs.
Yeah, okay.
No, question. Go ahead, finish up.
No, I was going to say, and all these CEOs of all these cigarette companies testified before Congress saying nicotine is not addictive. Nicotine is not addictive. So it was an ugly situation. So you have a question.
Yes. My 5-year-old Dell computer is starting to act kind of funny. So my question is, 2 questions actually. The operating systems, the newest one, when will the newest one be coming out? And you mentioned before that if I got a new computer, my question was, could I delete the old operating system, the operating system that it came with, and actually install maybe Windows 7? So I don't know, have they prohibited that from happening with the new operating system now?
Well, basically it's embedded in the BIOS, and Microsoft put this out there supposedly as a protection against deep hacking of their CPUs. But a lot of the brand new computers being manufactured today are basically wired to work with Windows 10 and only with Windows 10. So you need to talk to whoever you're going to buy your new computer from, and you may want to consider building a white box. Because that frees you from that restriction. And by that I mean you literally buy a motherboard, your memory, your drives, and you put the whole box together yourself, and then you can put whatever operating system on it that you want. And that may be a way to go. Most of the computers we've had around here for the last several years have been white boxes. This one here is a white box. Actually, technically it's black, but you get the drift here.
Yeah, do you know when the next operating system will be released? Is there a pattern on that? What month?
Well, actually what I'm understanding is that Microsoft has decided that this idea of a whole new operating system every so many years is expensive. It's led to a bloated operating system that's difficult to maintain. And what they're saying is Windows 10 will be the last Windows, and they will just continue to improve on and work with that platform, copying what Apple has done with the Macintosh, where they'll just be the operating system, and they'll make improvements and try and grow it into the future. But they're moving away from that business model of forcing you to buy a new operating system every so many years. Now, the downside to that is they're also moving to a business model where you will license your operating system with regular recurring payments. Again, it's always designed to maximize profitability to Microsoft. And I think, though, the reason so many people were turned off by Windows 10 was, first of all, the disaster that was Windows 8, and then finally the very heavy-handed attempt to push Windows 10 onto everybody's machine. And also, they released it prematurely because we had a laptop that was being used to support Claire's choir, and it was a Windows 7 machine. And just to be fair to Microsoft, I allowed it to do the automatic upgrade to Windows 10, and it was a disaster. Things wouldn't run. It literally erased the music file directories. Obviously, I had backups. And I'm not talking about just go into the trash bin where you can drag them on out. I mean, they were simply gone. And it was trying to force me to use my Microsoft credentials for my login name and password, and I didn't want to do that. And it just got to this idea of, you know, Microsoft is going to tell you, you know, how you're going to organize your computer. And I kind of bolted at that one. So I'm on Windows 7, and when I'm no longer able, well, actually, this machine's XP. But if I'm no longer allowed to have an operating system of my choice, then I'm going to go to Linux. The only reason I'm still on Windows now anyway is because of Claire's music software and my animation software, which these days I hardly ever use anyway, so it wouldn't be that big a disaster if I didn't have it anymore. But yeah, that's what Microsoft is planning. But if you build a white box, you can put whatever operating system you want. And the other option, of course, is to talk to the various computer manufacturers and say, will this box allow me to put Windows 7 on there? Now, you can actually order new computers with Windows 7 as long as Windows 7 is still officially being supported by Microsoft, which I think is another year. But they're not carried in the stores. The stores are pushing Windows 10, but you can go to a computer store and say, I would like that machine with Windows 7, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to say, well, we can special order it, and that's another way for you to go.
All right. Hey, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Dan in British Columbia. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. I haven't called for a while, actually, since before the election, so I just want to congratulate the Americans on your victory. The people have spoken. Our Prime Minister here in Canada, after being elected, had to fly to England and ask permission from Queen Elizabeth to be our Prime Minister.
Yes.
And if I recall in history class, America fought a war to free itself from England.
Yeah. Well, first of all, with regard to the first part, that is a tradition that the Prime Ministers of Great Britain and all of the far-flung empire have to have the Queen's permission to go ahead and form a government, and there's this whole ceremony they go through where they have to kneel to the Queen, and the Queen gives them her blessing. And it's not like the Queen has ever told somebody, no, you don't have my permission. It's just a traditional ritual that they go through.
Okay, anyways, you had a little article yesterday about the CIA controlling the mainstream media. And, you know, this goes back at least to November 22nd, 1963. You got, like, Walter Cronkite comes on CBS and says, in Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas. That was the first lie.
Yes. Then you had
Gerald Ford comes out.
Then you had Dan Rather saying Kennedy's head rocketed forward, which that was also a lie. But the CIA's control of the media actually goes back to the end of World War II, when the CIA was first being formed. One of the first things they decided to do was to take covert control of the media, and they patted themselves after the Nazi propaganda machine, and they called it Operation Mockingbird.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that, too. There's a great book by L. Fletcher Prouty.
Yes.
And your listeners probably would recognize Donald Sutherland, the Canadian actor who was in the movie JFK, who played Mr. X. And that was L. Fletcher Prouty.
Yes.
And this book is called The Secret Team, the Central Intelligence Agency and its allies in control of the United States and the world, in 1973. Great book. I don't know if you've ever read it.
Yes, I did many, many years ago when it first came out that the Mr. X character was based on L. Fletcher Prouty. But I don't think the CIA's control is as firm as it used to be, and certainly as more and more people find out that the CIA is itself the largest drug smuggling operation on the planet, people are saying that they don't want to go along with that anymore. They don't want to be part of that anymore.
Yeah, I think Trump's the first president that since Kennedy's assassination, who's been a real president. I think they got rid of Robert F. Kennedy because he was an outsider.
Well, they got rid of Robert F. Kennedy because they were absolutely terrified that with the power of the White House, he could reopen the investigation into the assassination of his older brother, and that was the same reason for the assassination attempt against Teddy Kennedy at Chappaquiddick, because he was getting ready to run for the White House, and with the authority and power of the White House, could have ripped open the investigation into John F. Kennedy's assassination. But Teddy Kennedy survived the assassination attempt. It was supposed to look like a car accident, but because of Mary Jo Kopechne in that back seat, Teddy Kennedy was damaged enough where he was no longer going to win the White House, and he stopped being a threat.
Exactly. Yeah, Trump, I think, needs to maybe reopen that investigation, or at least finish JFK's pledge to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it into the winds.
I would definitely be in favor of that last one, but I think Trump's focus needs to be on more recent events, like whether Hillary Clinton was in fact selling secrets to foreign governments through that weak email server and collecting and laundering the payments through that so-called charitable foundation. I would like to see the Vincent Foster case re-examined and exposed as the murder it was, but even that's getting too old to really be relevant today.
Well, Trump actually did mention that, didn't he?
Which one?
He mentioned the Foster murder.
He mentioned the Foster,
I believe, during the campaign.
He did, and he also mentioned doubts about what happened on 9/11. And again, Trump is going to be very, very busy, and I think we all need to ask a very simple question. Do we really need another official investigation into any of this stuff? Because it's just going to be another chance for the government to polish up the lies. We all know what happened. We've got the broad strokes here. I don't need another investigation into John F. Kennedy. I'm pretty, I know what happened. I know what happened to Vince Foster. And I know what happened on 9/11. And we may disagree on some of the fine details, but we all know we were being lied to by the government and the corporate media. Let's just start on that foundation and say, what are we going to do about it now? In my mind, it's a waste of time and money to have a new government investigation into any of this stuff.
Yeah, perhaps. But there was a great interview with Wayne Madsen yesterday.
Yes,
so I
it was.
bought his book on Amazon.
Oh, good for you.
Good job. Yeah, thanks. All right, well, have a good show. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, not the vaccines. I think it's even more insidious than you're saying, than just profits. I personally think all you got to do is look at the Georgia Guidestones. I'm sure you know what that is, right?
Yes, I do.
What they want, what the New World Order wants, what the globalists or whatever the so-called elites want, is they want to drastically reduce the world's population.
Yes.
They have no intent of having half the people not working, half the people. Their intent is to kill the majority of not only of the world's population. And they've got clowns like Bill Gates and others who are, so it's very big pushes of these vaccines going around the world with that to try to accomplish what they want to accomplish.
Yeah, Bill Gates has openly said that he wants to use vaccines to cull the world's population. We know that there was some reason the USDA was funding the development of that epicite gene in the corn, that if you eat it, it makes you unable to reproduce. And we know that there are all these billionaires who are absolutely convinced the fact that they are billionaires gives them a right to run the planet and say, oh, there's too many useless eaters, let's get rid of them, it'll be beautiful. And what's really amazing is Tom Clancy's last book that he wrote himself without a ghostwriter was called Rainbow Six. And part of its story,
I remember that.
Yeah, part of its story involved a bunch of ultra-wealthy people who just decided they were going to wipe out 95% of the world population so the planet would go back to nature and it would be beautiful, except, of course, for their mansions. And that the world would be so much better without all those other people, those hoi polloi and riffraff around. And we do know there are people who think like that. Now, whether the mercury in the vaccines has anything to do with that, I'm not sure, because the mercury in the vaccines isn't killing people. It is disabling them.
I'm reading this book now called Inferno. I think it was just a movie recently. I haven't seen a movie. It also has to do with wanting to pretty much bring an end to much or most of the Earth population. So you do have these types. And another thing about Bill Gates, by his own admission, his father was the head of. He brags about it, that his father was the head of Planned Parenthood, which is nothing but a eugenist organization named after a Nazi eugenicist, Margaret Sanger, in Seattle, in the Seattle area, and he brags about it. This guy, people just don't understand how evil this guy is. They just don't understand. I think he's one of the most, along with Soros and a few others, he's one of the most evil men on this planet. And I don't care how many computers he invented or what he might have done, if he even invented these computers. I understand it was really given to him by DARPA. So
no. First of all, Bill Gates did not invent any computers. He invented an operating system for the first IBM PC, except that he didn't write it himself. He actually bought it from another programmer for like pennies, and then turned around and came up with this idea of licensing the software for perpetual cash flow, and he wound up, becoming the richest man on planet Earth. And like George Soros, he thinks these billions give him some kind of a divine right to play with planet Earth and all of its people like personal toys. And I disagree with that model of governance because he's not elected. And I understand the position that there's a population problem, and there always will be, because sex is a lot more fun than dying. My problem with the population control people is they always want somebody else to die or somebody else to go without children, never themselves. So anytime I have somebody getting in my face about there's too many people, I say, okay, there's a very tall building over there. If you honestly believe it's a problem, you can do something about it. Jump off that building and try and hit a private central banker on the way down. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, coming up on the top of the hour. And story coming out of activistpost.com saying, why is the corporate media, actually they call it the Deadstream media, good name, I like it, why is the corporate media ignoring these GMO studies that have been coming on out? They ignored the French study. They've ignored the one that came on out just a month ago, showing that rats fed GMO and glyphosate, even at 3 months they look healthy, they're not, because their digestive tract is damaged. It's another way in which the corporate media is proving that it is the enemy of the American people and the people around the world. That's the real wake-up call that America's going through right now. It's not that the government lies to us every once in a while, or individual politicians lie to us once in a while, or every once in a while the corporate media tries to pull a fast one like ABC and the Food Lion scandal. It's that it's constant. We're living in a real-life version of the Matrix, surrounded by this complete illusion of what we're told is real life. And people are now waking up and realizing, wow, we've been lied to about just about everything. Americans are the most lied to people on the face of planet Earth, and it's time for them to wake up and say, I understand that now, and I'm angry. We could almost rewrite that wonderful scene from the movie Network, where the Howard Beale character is standing up there saying, I'm mad as heck and I'm not going to take this anymore. We could rewrite that to say, you guys are full of poo and I'm not going to listen to you anymore. And that's really what we have to say to MSNBC or CNN or the New York Slimes or the Washington Compost or the cruddy non-news. We know you guys are just full of it and we are not listening to you anymore. Which brings us to human-caused global warming. It's snowing on Mount Laguna down in San Diego. And over in the town of Pocatello, Idaho, they have already gone through their entire budget for snow removal for the year. It's already been used up from all the record snow that they're dealing with over there. The Mesa Verde National Park had to close. Too much snow, too dangerous, too much risk of avalanche. Now, up in Alaska, where they're used to dealing with snow, they've had to declare an emergency in communities like Seward and Moose Pass. They're dealing with more than 30 inches of snow. And down in New Zealand, they're still talking about this weather bomb that has brought huge amounts of snow, and it is the middle of their summer. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with hour number 3 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We have a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to get to you in just a minute, but I want to finish up with the human-caused global warming, because apparently there is so much snow falling across the American West, it is starting to collapse buildings. And apparently hundreds of buildings, and yes, they were older and weaker, but they've literally collapsed under the weight of the accumulated snow. There's been at least 1 death attributed to this. Now, there was a story we ran on the website where scientists are saying that there is a strong possibility that El Nino will resurface and impact the monsoon season for 2017. And they're saying climate models and blah, 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 blah. The reality is climate models have never really been reliable in predicting El Nino. And the reason for that is, I think, and I wrote an article about this, the El Nino current rises from a point source that is over a large cluster of undersea volcanoes. And I think that's the source of the El Nino. It's not human cause, has nothing to do with human activity. It's geothermal. And remember, anytime somebody says human activity is warming the oceans, cooling the oceans, just say, how many active volcanoes and thermal vents are there on the floor of the world's oceans? And when they say, I don't know, you just say, nobody does. And if nobody knows how much heat is being added to the ocean by geothermal events, then you can't possibly know what the human contribution is. And what I did is I pulled up that article again and I took a look. And the point source for El Nino is right in that same area along the Solomon Islands and the Solomon Trench, which has been hit with this whole series of monster quakes lately. And so I agree, there's probably going to be a very strong El Nino, because those quakes might be indicating or stimulating increased volcanic activity. That means more heat into the water. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Kyle in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I understand on the El Nino real quick. From what I understand, there's also another very large warm body area that's called La Nina on the other side of the Earth, almost directly on the other side from El Nino. So I don't know how that plays into global weather. But the reason why I called is you had mentioned NDAs as they apply to, whistleblowers and things like that. NDAs are not allowed to protect illegal activity. So if Trump were to bring up vaccine drug pharma makers and have hearings under oath, and they would perjure themselves, anybody who is under an NDA would then be free of that NDA because the manufacturers would have perjured themselves, and the NDA would not protect them against breaking the law.
Okay, now what is your source for saying that NDAs are not binding in illegal activity? Because certainly looking at what happened to Dr. Weigand with the cigarette company, it was a real threat, and they literally had to be jumping around states trying to find a state where the laws were a little bit more forgiving. But they were saying basically if he testified, he couldn't go home to his home state without being arrested. And again, it's a good movie to look at, and it shows how dirty corporations will fight to maintain their profitability and silence anybody who's calling into question the safety and efficacy of their products. So I would like to see an actual cite that an NDA is voided by illegal activity, because that was not my understanding.
Yeah, I believe there was a case in the early 2000s that revolved around manufacturing of defective products. Don't quote me on which product, which they argued it set a precedent, yada yada yada. Therefore, NDAs do not protect you.
Okay, well that would have been after the Wiegand situation. So maybe the law has changed, and if it has, that's a good thing, because we need to have protection for whistleblowers who come forward when corporations and government are behaving badly and illegally. We the people have a right to know that these things are going on. We have a right to know if the government that lives off our taxes is spending that money well or spending it illegally, engaging in torture and various other war crimes. And we, the consumers, have a right to know that when we go into a store, what we buy off the shelf is safe for us, it will do what we're promised it will do, and stands a decent chance of lasting a while. And one of the things that I bemoan about our recent economic history is we've all fallen into this idea that as long as there's a warranty, that we don't need to worry about the actual durability of a product, because, you know, if you take it home and it dies, you just take it back and you get another one. And if that dies, you take it back and get another one. That's a huge loss of time and productivity. And especially if you live someplace remote like Hawaii, where you have to go back to the original manufacturer to have the warranty honored, then you're looking at weeks of shipping time on top of everything else.
Well, and I heard a statistic that I think 82% of all flat-screen television failures are due to a fuse that costs around 89 cents. That there's a special little hatch on the back of the majority of TVs that is 4 screws. You bring it out, you'll see that the fuse is blown. That fuse is what allows the light to project really behind the image so you can actually see it. And people are buying all new TVs, just planned and perceived obsolescence, because of a 69, 89 cent fuse that could be switched out in a matter of about 5 minutes. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Well, when our high-def TV blew out, we basically got black lines coming down the middle of the screen, and the service that we bought the extended warranty plan, thank goodness, and the representative came on out and said, "Oh yeah, that's that. Can you replace the screen? Nah, can't replace the screen. Can't get the parts. We're just going to give you a new TV," and that's how we got our 3D TV.
And as to the caller earlier with the computer question, the operating system question.
Yes.
Anybody who's not using Linux, I know it seems intimidating. I know it seems like something you've never done before. But if you have anybody who can properly install a Linux operating system and install a, free, there's a lot of this freeware out there. There's programs that mimic Windows 100% accurately.
OpenOffice will run on Linux. I mean, I love Linux. I mean, the first operating system I really had a great deal of time to work with was Unix, which is very, very similar. And then X Windows came along after that. I mean, this machine I've got in front of me here is a triple boot. It runs Windows 7, Windows XP, and Linux.
Yeah, well, I made the switch to Linux, and anytime I need a file opening program, anytime I need a streaming program, anytime I need any sort of program, there are websites out there that all these programs that you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for are, audio, video editing programs, music playing programs, anything like that. You search it on the internet. There's websites. People have made these programs 100% free. They're out there.
Yeah, they're crowdsourced. They're crowd developed. Where you'll have a group of people working together on the project, and they do produce some very good product as well. And Microsoft has now tried to revive what's called the look and feel lawsuit to shut some of these operations down. And Microsoft's thinking they're not saying that people stole the software or pirated the software. They're saying it just looks too much like our product and people could be confused about it. No, not really, because Microsoft's products runs on Windows and the Linux products run on Linux. And on that simple excuse, most of these companies have evaded the legislation, but rather the lawsuits. But Microsoft loves to file lawsuits even if they know they're not going to win. The goal is to bankrupt some of these organizations, which, because they're not really for-profit corporations, they don't have the resources to mount a legal defense. But there's the GNU project, Free Software Foundation, and if you're into Linux, you got to get into GNU. All kinds of powerful software development tools. When I need to write custom software, I do it on Linux because the software development environment for Windows is clearly designed for large corporate software development departments where there's a lot of people working and they have to coordinate. And it's made it very, very difficult for a single person to write decent software.
Well, and the programs that are being developed for Windows are being developed so vanilla and so bland so that they're so accessible to the masses that finding programs that do the specific function that you need, especially if you're doing high-end stuff like, you know, coding, development, things like that, it's next to impossible. These programs have just become so incredibly
bloated is the word you're looking for.
Yeah.
Bloated is the word you're looking for. Well, you know, I mean, that was how they would just, you know, stimulate new sales. We've got, you know, the new version, and it will do this and this and this and this, and people said, oh, I want to have the new version. But if you're using Microsoft Word, chances are that you're never going to use 95% of what's in there because it is all in there for certain special applications. And again, if you go to OpenOffice, and there's another one out there called, I think it's NetOffice, and these are for free Office suites that you can use. And they're compatible with the older version of Microsoft Office. Microsoft has responded by changing their proprietary file formats to make it more difficult to migrate over. But yeah, I mean, for the basic needs of an office, OpenOffice works great. I've got OpenOffice on here.
A friend of mine went out and bought a very, very popular video editing program.
Yeah.
You know, recording, editing. He was loving it. He was fooling around with it. He went to go record. He paid a fortune for it. I paid over 3 digits. And he goes to record an audio track. He records the audio track, he opens it up, goes to edit it. A pop-up says, to edit your software, go out and buy this company's audio software editing program.
Yeah, the codec. Yeah, the codecs. That was a nightmare. First of all, I need to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network. And we used to have something called the Bureau of Standards in this country. And to really understand what's going on, you almost need to go back and study the history of Unix itself and how it came to be. And what it was, Unix originally came out of the Bell Laboratories, and it evolved out of necessity because prior to Unix, every model computer from every computer company had its own operating system, and they were all different, and it was done to discourage people from changing brands of computers. Once you had this company's computers and operating system and programming languages, you didn't want to move to another one because the changeover would be prohibitively expensive. So over at the Bell Labs, they were getting all the old leftover computers from other Bell affiliates who were upgrading, and they had all these different machines, and they all had these different operating systems. So somebody sat down and said, look, let's just write a simple, basic operating system in the C programming language that will compile and run on all of these various boxes, and that's what they did. And it was originally just internal to Bell Labs. So the sales reps from the computer companies come on over, and they go absolutely ballistic. The idea that there's an alien operating system running on their hardware, and worse, it's the same operating system from machine to machine. So Bell Labs made a public announcement that Unix was internal to Bell only. They were not going to sell it as a commercial product. At that point, the University of California at Berkeley, who had a source license for the Bell Unix, decided they were going to release their own with what were called the Berkeley enhancements. And that became known as the BSD, Berkeley Standard Distribution Unix, which became the foundation for the acceptance of Unix as a standard all across computer graphics and animation companies. And that's what we used at Robert Abel. And then, of course, once Bell saw what a success it was being, they came on out with their flavor of Unix, which was System 5. And so the tendency for the end user is they want simple and standard and uniform. That was part of the thinking behind the Amiga computer. But the computer companies, they want you using their software, their codecs, and the codec system is a nightmare. When we, it's true, you'll get a lot of software and you go to use it and it pops up and says you have to buy a codec from this company. And so it's, you know.
You go into the software. If you don't unlock it, you can unlock it. It's already there. You just need to unlock it.
You need a licensing agreement. Yeah. But
yeah.
After.
Real quick before I get off.
All right.
Sorry. If you want to see a great fictional retelling of basically what you were talking about, I cannot recommend the show *Halt and Catch Fire*.
Oh, I love that.
Texas
I love that show. I lived so much of that myself. And for those who don't understand, the name *Halt and Catch Fire* is because one of the very earliest consumer home computers, there was an address that if you loaded that address into the CPU, it would actually burn out part of the computer. And hence the joke, halt and catch fire. All right, Kyle, we're going to let you go here. And again, back to this codec nonsense. It is a big headache. After I left the production company that did the movie Final Fantasy, I was hired by another company here that was doing multimedia development for education. And everybody's computer systems had different codecs, and that meant when you tried to move audio and video or graphics from one machine to the other, it was just this giant headache. And part of my effort in trying to sort of overhaul the production workflow was to say, we're only going to use these particular codecs, and no others are allowed. And that smoothed out a lot of those headaches. But everybody's getting residuals on those codecs. They want you using their codecs. And some of them are very good, especially the high-end image compression ones, and some of them are just junk that get sold out there as part of package deals with computer vendors from the software vendors. So it's a mess, and it makes life very hard for the end user to generate a little bit more profit for these computer companies. Now then, getting on back to the present day. As you know, Donald Trump signed an executive order to move the Dakota Access and Keystone pipelines forward. Now, apparently in these executive orders, there is a call for some renegotiation of where the pipelines are actually going to go. There is a demand that only American-produced pipe be used in these pipelines, which may enhance their safety, because when you're buying the cheapest possible pipe you can, you're going to get stuff that fails. And you know, people are protesting the Dakota Access and Keystone pipelines, and there is a genuine concern. But hopefully in this renegotiation, Trump is going to find a win-win situation for everybody. Now then, speaking of buying cheaply, here in Hawaii, we have this light rail project, which has been a nightmare. It's billions of dollars over budget, years behind schedule, and about 2-3 weeks ago, it was announced they're going to have to replace all of the cars for this light rail system because they discovered these 4 giant aluminum beams that form the floor and frame of the cars are defective and already cracking. And now we got news just a week ago that these special little pads on the tops of the pylons that hold the tracks in place, they're going to have to be replaced because they're already cracking and they haven't even had trains on them yet. So, again, this desire for profitability, this lust for paper with colored ink on it, it's destroying the better qualities of what it was to be an American. Pride in your work, a desire to make something that was safe and reliable. Too many corners are being cut here. Apparently, U.S. salmon may be contaminated with a Japanese tapeworm, and apparently it's the first time it's been seen on this side of the Pacific. And you know, if you know anything about a tapeworm, and you eat one, that can be a real problem. It's a horrible parasite. Believe it or not, at one time there was a diet aid being sold that was a tapeworm egg, and that did not stay on the market for very long. We are going to take a break for some commercials. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And looking at some of the headlines that are pouring in here during the program, we're seeing all these articles responding to the earlier comments about shattering the CIA, and it has become rogue. There's no question about that. RIF.com has a story about the need to reorganize the U.S. spy agencies and remind them that they're supposed to be working for the president and the American people, not the other way around here. Apparently, the liberal media tried to make a big deal over the fact that Donald Trump brought back the bust of Winston Churchill as a decoration for the Oval Office. And they were out there screaming about the insult to Martin Luther King until somebody pointed out that the bust of Martin Luther King is in fact still in the Oval Office. There's no rule that says you only can allow one bust in there. He's the president. He can put whatever he wants there. But again, the liberal media is just, they're on the warpath. They are absolutely on the warpath. And yet, every time they come up with another attack, it backfires on them. Now, apparently, over at the Veterans Administration, people are already being fired for the mishandling of the treatment of our wounded veterans, as they should be. There was a big stink a while ago. We did a flashback article on this one about how the VA was just taking all this mail they were getting from veterans and just shredding it, not even reading it. That's pretty tacky, if you will. They were altering records to make it look like veterans were getting timely medical care that they never actually received. The attitude seemed to have been, if you're not able to fight anymore, you're no use to us, so just go off and die somewhere. Now, McDonald's, this is a weird one. I don't go to McDonald's anymore. I haven't been to a McDonald's in a very, very, very long time. Apparently, they're rolling out Big Mac vending machines. Now, I have no idea how these work, if they are, in fact, robot assembly lines inside that take the ingredients and make the burger right then and there, or somebody just loads them up with Big Macs the way they would potato chips, in which case I have no idea how long that Big Mac has been there. But I think that's a little bit out there. McDonald's is actually in trouble. And the reason they are is for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, Americans are becoming very conscious about the quality of the food they're eating, whether it's filled with additives, fillers, chemicals like monosodium glutamate, artificial sweeteners like aspartame. The other factor is that McDonald's, like Radio Shack, made a disastrous decision to abandon their original customer base. Now, when I was a kid, and you probably remember the same thing, McDonald's reputation was, this is the place that you go to get a meal if you don't have a lot of money in your pocket. And then all of a sudden, a few years ago, McDonald's wanted to go upscale, and they started doing designer interiors on their stores in the McCafe, and they got really pretentious, and the prices went up at the same time. And the people who really tend to take their trade to upscale eateries weren't being fooled. It was still a McDonald's. And McDonald's original customer base, people looking for an affordable meal, couldn't afford to go there anymore. So now they're going to come out with a Big Mac vending machine. Now, over in the Congress, this idea of abortion is a very contentious one. And it's hard to, you simply can't say all yes or all no. I understand and recognize there are situations in which an abortion is needed to save the life of the mother, or if because of incest, or something else, the child is already showing on the ultrasound that they're not going to be born well. Maybe, maybe not. Where I have a real problem with it, I'll tell you when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about abortion, and it's a complicated issue, but apparently Congress is looking at rescinding Roe versus Wade, which is just a blanket, you can have an abortion for any reason, and they're going to replace it with what they call the heartbeat bill, which is that if the doctor can detect a fetal heartbeat, at that point the baby is protected. Now, if corporations can be legal persons, so can unborn human beings. One of the things I really disliked about the liberal agenda was when, like, Hillary Clinton came on out and said that you could kill an unborn baby right up to the moment of birth, and there was nothing wrong with that, you shouldn't feel guilty, but if you damage an eagle's egg, you are going to go to prison. Now, part of the problem I have with the way abortion was politicized, and this goes back to the 1990s and the militant feminism, was this idea that a woman had the choice whether to have a child or not, and whatever her choice was, some man was going to be made to pay for it somewhere. And that included in the context of a marriage, where, I mean, when I was a kid, I grew up wanting to be a dad. That was one of my high ambitions, and it didn't work out. And in my first marriage, my wife got pregnant, and I said, before we even got married, I said, I want to have a family. She, oh, yes, yes, okay. So she got pregnant and got an abortion. And I'm like, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden she's dumping on me like I'm the villain and I'm the bad guy, and she's just regurgitating all this stuff she got off of Donahue and Oprah about how men don't really want children, they just say that to, and it went on and on. It ultimately was one of the causes that led to the divorce. But I think this heartbeat bill does strike a balance there. The one issue I have about abortion is women who will not have birth control because they don't want to think of themselves as that kind of woman. Then, of course, they have a moment of weakness, nature takes its course, and they become pregnant, and they want to use abortion like, you know, a retroactive birth control. And that I really do have a little bit of a problem with. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Tim Spencer, who's host of the Rural Survival Show here on RBN. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael.
Yes.
I'm really and truly enjoying your show today, buddy, and I wanted to call you to tell you that. And on the subject we're talking about, I am in 1,000% agreement with you. Abortion should not be used as birth control. It is wrong, it is immoral, and that's my opinion on it.
Well, I absolutely agree with you, and one of the issues is all these feminists will come on out and say to anti-abortionists, you know, you don't know when life begins. And, of course, at the same time, they're acting like they do. You know, that we know that life doesn't really begin until this point. You have no way of knowing. For one thing, it's not an off-on switch. It's a continuum.
No.
And
I agree.
I did a video when this whole Planned Parenthood thing was coming on down. I did a video, and it was just very simple. It was set to some of the music my lovely wife had written, and it was a simple question. And it simply showed a whole bunch of famous people, ending with the question, you know, the observation, they all began as a fetus. And so what part of the future was murdered today, and that was over a scan of Planned Parenthood? You wouldn't believe all the hate email I got on that one.
Oh, yes, I would. Absolutely, I would. You know, fetus, all that is the Latin word for baby.
Yeah.
That is truly all it is.
Yeah, it's, like I said, it's a gray area. I understand and accept that there are circumstances where it is definitely needed. And justified.
I agree.
But just, again, women who don't want to have birth control because they don't want to see themselves as that kind of woman, and then they get caught and, you know, abortion is just a retroactive birth control. I do have a real problem with that one.
Oh, I do too. You know, I've got 8 grandchildren, Michael.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
And I could, you know, I couldn't imagine any of them not being here. you know, to me, the whole idea is horrible. Of course, I love kids, and I fully admit I do. My little 3-year-old granddaughter that lives with us, and her parents live with us, too. It's not one of those deals where Mama took off and left the baby. I mean, you know, the whole family lives here on the farm.
Yes.
And my little 3-year-old granddaughter, you know, my world would not be complete without her. It's that simple. You know, she's my spark. She's my reason for living.
No, I understand that exactly. I understand that exactly. And by the way, here in Hawaii, multi-generational families living in the same house is actually quite common. It came in from some of these other cultures that populated Hawaii after most of the indigenous were killed off by measles. And so that's a very, very common thing. And, of course, Claire and I are way too old to have kids. We can't adopt because then you got to teach them how to look like you. But I got to tell you, Claire and I make the greatest auntie and uncle you've ever seen to other people's children.
Oh, I believe that, Michael. I truly believe that, buddy. You know, we're indigenous, too. My wife and I are both half-breeds.
Okay.
And but we live in the native ways. And my wife is actually an elder.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, she is. And but we live in the native ways, and that brings me back to another point. You were talking about Dakota Access Pipeline. Now, I don't know if this is true, but just scuttlebutt, you know, in other words, rumors that I have heard, is saying that the tribal leaders, the presidents of corporations that are now tribes, or tribes that are now corporations, however you want to say it,
yes,
have signed off on this stuff. And if that is the case, as much as I hate to say it and admit it, the tribes themselves don't really have a leg to stand on in these protests. And I don't want to, you know, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that the information I'm being given is wrong.
Well, I've heard nothing about that, but on the other hand, you know, we know that political corruption is not confined to Washington, D.C. In fact, if you look at the circumstances that led up to that whole shooting incident that got Leonard Peltier thrown into prison, it was a group of wealthy indigenous Americans who were trying to take advantage of everybody else around them, and it factionalized the tribe. And it was very unclear that who was really in the right, only who, you know, who had the law on their side, and that's what led to the friction. Again, I think the protesters against these pipelines have a legitimate concern. They have a long track record of leaking and hopelessly contaminating large sections of ground and water supplies.
Oh, I absolutely agree. The only good point I can see in this is Trump has demanded that only American-made pipe be used in the construction of this pipeline, which is a really big plus. But, you know, we can still have earthquakes, we can still have landslides, you know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Sinkholes, yeah.
Sinkholes, yeah, that type of stuff. And that scares the hell out of me. You know, the Missouri River feeds into the Mississippi. And, you know, there's a lot of water supplies come out of the Mississippi. Of course, it's purified. But still, you know, you get hydrocarbons in there. How do you purify that on an industrial scale?
Well, that might be something that's worth funding as a research project, because I remember when I worked on the Mississippi, the joke then was it's too thick to drink and too thin to plow, so we're just going to put riverboats on it.
There you go. I understand that completely. I truly do, Michael. But, you know, I don't know what the real story is. I doubt if we'll ever get the real story. I will tell you one thing. Native American politics is the most vicious entity that one could ever be in. It makes U.S. politics, Russian politics, Ukrainian politics look like kindergarten. It truly does.
Yeah.
I've gone
and
to
again,
many council meetings. where, guns were pulled. That is not unusual. In fact, it's normal. Guns, knives, people being thrown out of windows. I've seen all that with my own eyes. It's very, very vicious.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that I want to tarnish all the indigenous Americans with that image, because
I'm just telling you what I saw, Michael.
No, I understand. I'm going to offer a counter view that when Claire and I were living in Washington State, we got involved with the local Snoqualmie tribe, who were just trying to get their tribal status. And they were all very lovely, nice, and peaceful people. So I think it's going to vary from place to place like it does everywhere else in the world. Anyway, Tim, I got a bunch of callers waiting on the line. So
okay, buddy. I enjoyed talking with you. You're welcome calling my show anytime, and I hope you have a good evening, sir.
All right, thank you very much. And, yeah, I'll give your show a call at some point in the near future. We're going to switch over here to Mitch in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I got a quick question for you. Is there a way to find out who the members of the press are at each White House press briefing? I've tried 5 different searches on the internet, and I keep getting the same results.
I don't know off the top of my head. I would almost suggest that you actually contact the White House and see if they're going to have a page at the White House website that shows who's currently in those White House press briefings. What's really interesting is there's a report now that they're going to set up a couple of computers with Skype on them to allow people who are in the independent media remotely to take part in these White House press conferences, and that would definitely be something I'd like to get involved with.
Yeah, that would be cool. All right, well, I appreciate it. Have a good day.
All right, same to you. We're going to switch over to David in California. Aloha, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I lost him.
Okay, let's switch over to Sherry in Fredericksburg. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I have a take on abortion that I've never heard before, except one person mentioned something to me once. And I don't believe what either side says. I think the important thing is you got to focus on the mom and make sure she's going to be okay whether she has an abortion or not. Because I wanted a second child. My husband wanted to go ahead and have we have a wonderful son. He's just fabulous. But I had my strong feelings about having a second child, and he went ahead and had his operation. I said, okay, that's all right. So, but I believe it's important to honor the body. Let me get that out right away, because we couldn't be here without it. It's how we get here.
Yes.
But I don't believe we can say to God, sorry, God, you're out of luck. You can't bring this body into the world because Mom had an abortion. I believe in the word ruah, meaning wind, breath, and spirit. When Adam breathed the breath of life, if you want to, look at that, he breathed the spirit life as well. And I think God's going to bring that child into the world. And it'll probably be in your life, and it'll probably serve the purpose it was supposed to serve on some level. But if he wants that child here, God works in and through all that breathe, and the breath is, you can reproduce now, you are in the world, and I don't think anyone can keep God from letting that happen because of this ruah, meaning wind, breath, and spirit. You just, I don't know, Mike, I have my reasons to believe this because I won't go into it, but I have a reason to believe that some child might have come into my life anyway. And I just will leave it at that. Okay. And I'm just going to throw that out there as another alternative.
All right, well, thank you for your opinion here, and we're going to let you go. Okay. Switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike.
Hi.
On Monday, this guy went up to the Marine Guard at the White House and said that he'd like to go in and meet with President Obama. And the guard said to him, "Sir, Mr. Obama is not the president anymore. He no longer resides here." So the guy said, "Okay." Now, yesterday, same guy goes back to the same Marine Guard and says that he'd like to go in and meet with President Obama. And the Marine Guard again says, "Sir, as I told you yesterday, Mr. Obama is no longer the president and he no longer resides here. Did you not understand?" And the man said, "Oh, I understand. I just like hearing it."
Yes.
The Marine Guard snapped to attention, saluted, and said, See you tomorrow, sir.
Yeah, I had heard variations on that one as well. And, you know, Obama's out there trying to do his legacy thing here. And when Hillary gets her talk show going for her run for 2020, I'm sure Obama will be a regular guest there. And, you know, just trying to resell that whole identity politics thing. By the way, somebody wrote in and reminded me that we don't need a felony conviction of Hillary Clinton to keep her from running from the White House again. Congress can still impeach her after the fact for her behavior as Secretary of State. And if she's impeached, then she can no longer hold public office. So,
right. I wanted to say something about the MLK bust issue thing as well. Black Lives Matter, in its recent iconoclastic phase, where they want to tear down all kinds of statues of old dead white men and such, also ended up picking on, in several cases, these statues where there are various quotes of MLK, statues of MLK with quotes and stuff. And at the one, I think it was in Oregon University, they were picking on the quote from his I Have a Dream speech, where he says he hopes his 4 children can grow up in a country where they're judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. And the gripe of the group, they were thinking about taking that quote off because it was like insufficiently inclusive. And I thought, this is silly. You know, it was a statement about race. I mean, he specifies color of skin, and that's okay. It does, you know, if you can make a powerful statement about one specific issue, you don't have to make, it doesn't have to be a statement about every issue that we're concerned about today. It was about that issue at that time. And they actually want to, like, remove this quote, you know?
Well, you can't be all inclusive. There's simply too much out there. I mean, you could talk for 10 hours trying to list all the people, and there's still going to be somebody that say, oh, you forgot to mention the Pitcairn Islanders. You know, they're going to be offended because you didn't include them.
Exactly, precisely. So, I mean, the quote is so hugely powerful. I'm a 56-year-old white man, and I've always loved that quote. And I thought it was one of the most powerful quotes ever that came out of the civil rights movement. And these fools have to tinker with it because it doesn't fit their agenda. It doesn't address their agenda.
Okay, Glenn, I'm going to have to let you go. Glenn, I'm going to have to let you go. Going to take a break for a commercial. Back with our final phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm already getting lots and lots of email about the abortion issue. It certainly is a hot button here. We're going to take a phone call here from David in California. You can call back on in. And what is on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, when you were talking a little about abortion, about 7 months ago or something, I came upon a website that had an article on the internet that had these different groups that were not conservative, but they were one bumper sticker would say, if the choice is to kill, then yes, I am anti-choice. SecularProLife.org is their website. Other groups, Life Matters is one. New Wave Feminism against abortion. There's a lot of leftist groups that are against abortion because of the violent act of it.
Yes.
And then there were none as a group, Secular Pro-Life, Democrats for Life, and of America, Feminists for Nonviolent Choices, Pro-Life Allies. And one banner at a protest, for instance, said, Women for Nonviolent Choices, no war, no abortion, no death penalty. Anyways, I just wanted to put that in there. In the abortion thing, there's people on the left that, because of the violence towards call it the biological entity, they're against it. So.
Well, I mean, a lot of people have opinions. I'm getting, I just got an email from somebody saying, a baby isn't a separate human being until the umbilical cord is cut and the woman has the right to do whatever she wants with it. Well, I mean, half that baby is from the father as well, and I think he should have a say about that as well. So,
well, even if he says it's hers, though, it doesn't take away the pain. Why don't we show films of it everywhere if it's so nonviolent and everything?
Well, yeah, they definitely hide that. I mean, look at how Planned Parenthood responded to those undercover videos and the revelations that they were treating these aborted babies like they were, chicken parts, just cutting them up and selling them, not marketing them. And you know what's kind of amazing, you hear about all these Black Lives Matters, people out there screaming that whites are coming to kill them, whites are coming to kill them. They ought to look at Planned Parenthood, because Margaret Sanger actually set up Planned Parenthood specifically to target the black population. And
I'm aware of that. Colored people are weeds, she said.
Yes.
And the other thing about this whole thing with, you know, Napolitano was talking a lot to Trump, and the reason why I brought that up, it goes into first Snowden, because about a year or so ago, I wrote it down somewhere in my notebook, but I don't have it in front of me. Basically, Napolitano said Snowden is a hero, and
yes.
Ron Paul did too. And now that he got the ear of Donald Trump, I think that we should give a vote. It's not just to the left, but Leonard Pelletier and all these other people that truly deserve, in my opinion, and other people's, to be out of jail. Whether
I agree. Okay, David.
I hope he hears this, or someone can forward it to him. And that's about all I got for today.
Okay, well, that's good, because we just got the music starting, and it's time for us to close our show and make way for the next show that's coming on, which is John Stadmiller, of course. We will be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices, make a point of taking what you learn here and sharing it with other people gently. You're all part of Rivero's Rangers. You are all part of the independent media. Aloha, America.